Right, if you started landscape photography, you've probably already realized by now that beyond just buying all the different gear, you actually have to end up doing something with the photos. You actually have to store it somewhere. And the funny thing is that also ends up costing money. So what do? I mean, you spend all this time to go out, plan for these photography trips, to go and take the photos, and then you don't want to be left in a position where those photos accidentally get deleted, something happens with the hard drive, and you're left with nothing. Even for beginners who might not have the best photos when they're looking back at them, you still want to keep those photos for later on. Maybe you develop your editing skills a lot more, and then you're able to come back to the photos. But those photos mean a lot to us landscape photographers. Those are the result of all the hard work that we put in, and they symbolize what we felt in those moments. Even if they don't make it out into the world, we still want to keep them. And so we need to preserve them in some way. We need to make sure that we're able to persist those photos that we want to keep and not have to worry too much about something happening to them. And even though storage is thought to be very cheap, it can add up. External hard drives are known to fail over time, so you might end up buying more and more. And as you take more and more photos, you're going to end up needing to buy more external hard drives, and then you need backup for those and backup for those, and it just goes out of hand. And for me, I think it was really important to find something that was systematic, that I wouldn't have to really handhold that much, but also something that was affordable, right? And so today in this video, I'm going to be talking about my photography storage solution for landscape photos. So this different, because for those systems, you might even want to take it up a notch, right? You might want more backups than you currently have, and you need to have backups all the way along the stage. For example, when you're taking photos, you need to have 2 SD card slots so that if one SD card fails, you're not left with nothing. So I'm going to focus a lot more on landscape photography, especially if you are an amateur like me. So my primary storage solution is my laptop. It only has about 256 gigabytes of storage space available, and obviously not all of that will be taken up by photos, but my laptop contains the photos that I'm actively working on. So if I've gone out and taken photos, I'll import them into my laptop and then I'll work on them there, and they might live on my laptop for several months as well. But then I do have an SSD card where the overflow photos go. So over time, as I get more and more photos and my laptop can't house all of them, I will transfer my older photos that I've already worked on into this SSD. It's about 1 terabyte, and I have a lot of space because I only started taking photos about a year ago, but this seems to do a really good job. The reason I chose an SSD is it doesn't have the moving parts that an external disk drive might have, and that makes it a lot more robust and increases its lifetime as well. I don't want to keep replacing them every 3 or 5 years. I don't want to keep them plugged in all the time, and so this seems to work well for me. It's also very portable if I need to take it anywhere, but even then, I still need a backup for my photos in the event that something happens to either my laptop or my SSD. For me, I tried a bunch of different solutions, and the one that I ended up going with was Backblaze. Backblaze allows me to back up everything. It doesn't have a limit on the storage, and it doesn't have different pricing tiers for different amount of storage. It allows me to back up everything that's on my computer as well as any attached SSD, and in the event that anything happens to any of those files, I would just end up retrieving what I have for that system that failed. It works out pretty well for me, and it checks the box of having a backup that is not stored in the same location where you're living, right? So the guidance is that you want at least one of your backups to be in a location that is far away from your current location, just in case of things like earthquakes or floods. I mean, in that situation, you probably have more things to worry about. Now, obviously, if something happens to my system, as well as all the machines that are being used for the cloud server, then I'm out of luck. And I probably should have one extra layer of backup in between, but I'm not there yet. But it would probably look just like another SSD card of a similar magnitude, and I probably wouldn't even need to keep it elsewhere because the cloud would then just take care of that, and I could just keep it synced up here. So that is my main system, and I've configured Lightroom in a way that I'm able to just plug in my SSD card whenever I need to, and I'm able to operate on the files and change and edit those files while this is just plugged in, and then I can take it off. I don't have to keep on moving files back and forth whenever I plug this in, just to be able to edit those files. And I'll probably talk about my file management process in a different video. And something to sprinkle on top of this system is my use of SD cards. Whenever I'm out there and taking photos using an SD card, I will swap out other SD cards for it, just so that I don't have all sets of photos in just one SD card. And even when I come home and import those files onto my computer, I don't delete them immediately off of my SD card. I let them sit there, and eventually they'll get deleted, maybe a week or a month later, or whenever I need more space on the SD card. But that at least gives me some form of guarantee that, okay, if something didn't make it up into the cloud by then and something happened to my entire system, they might still be in my SD card and I'll still be able to recover it by then, because cloud syncing might take a little bit of time. But now I want to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of my system. Let's start off with the advantage. I think for me, I needed something that was automated and didn't really require a lot of hand holding. And so what this system allows me to do is I would just import the files and they would automatically get backed up to the cloud. I don't even have to worry about, as I transfer files from my computer to my SD card, what happens to them in the cloud, because Backblaze will end up taking care of syncing across all the files on my computer as well as the SSD involved. So that's advantage number one. It's very systematic and it's very efficient in being able to back up all my files. But the second advantage of the system is that it's just very budget friendly. So if you're looking for something that is affordable, you can obviously downgrade on the type of SSD you get, you can downgrade on the plan or the cloud service you use. In my opinion, it is relatively more affordable than a lot of the other solutions I've seen. And finally, what this system does is it creates a horizontally scaled solution. The problem I have with a lot of other solutions is that to be able to scale it horizontally, meaning as you get more and more photos, how do you build up your system? It requires a lot more money. With this system, all I need to do is buy more SD cards and connect them with my computer, or even upgrade the SD cards and sell the previous one I have. So let's talk about the cons of this system, right? Because obviously no system is going to be perfect. And the first one that I'll say is Backblaze support for multiple SSD cards is a little bit finicky. You need to have all of them plugged in at the same time so that it can sync up. And if you don't plug them in a 30-day period, you might end up losing the files on there. There's ways to expand that to 6 months or a year, but you have to pay a little bit more for that. But that is one big flaw that you need to be aware of. Obviously, if I don't plug it in for a month, I'm still able to plug it in the day after, and it would resync up everything, but that would take a little bit more time. And in that period, I have to worry if anything would happen to the photos in here. And with that, accessing the files that are on this SSD card are a little bit troublesome, because if I'm elsewhere, right, I only have the photos that are on my computer. But if I want to work on any of the photos that I've already moved on to this SSD card, then I can't access it as easily. I would have to go online and get the files off of Backblaze, which is a little bit more troublesome. Obviously, if it's a massive amount of file, it will take some time to download, but I do have the ability to do that if I need to. And like I said before, to really make the system more robust, I probably need one more backup in between this and Backblaze, but I'll get to that eventually, and I don't see a need for that right now because my sync speed between this and Backblaze is pretty fast. All right, now let's talk about other systems that you might consider that I also considered, but you might want to explore that a little bit more on your own to see if it fits your needs. And let's start with NAS drives. So NAS stands for Network Attached Storage, at least I think it does. And what this allows you to do is basically have a storage server located within your home on your network. You can have massive amounts of storage just accessible from your internet, right? So if you're working on your home and you want to switch computers, you're able to still access all the photos because they're on your home network. And so this is a solution that a lot of professional photographers use, but it is pretty expensive. Just buying those hard drives that you would have to swap in and out can be a little bit troublesome, but it does guarantee that you'll always be able to access the photos. Even if you're located somewhere else, you can always hop onto the internet and access the drives located in your home because they're connected to the internet. And with those systems, you could build in internal backups as well, meaning if one of the drives fails, you still have another copy of all the photos on another drive, but that would limit the overall total storage of that system. Like I said, it is more expensive, and if you're not shooting in a professional capacity, I really wouldn't say that it's very budget friendly either. Now, the next thing I looked into was cloud storage, specifically Glacier storage. So these web services like Google or Amazon, they have something called Glacier Cloud Storage, where you can put up photos into the cloud with the intent that you will almost never access them. And that's why they're called Glacier systems, because you can add to it and it gets put into what we call cold storage. And to retrieve those, it takes a lot of time and it costs a lot more. So maintaining that storage is very, very cheap, but retrieving anything from that storage is a lot more expensive. So it would only be a storage of last resort, meaning I would have another layer in between, which would be like Backblaze or another hard drive somewhere, and only when I've exhausted everything else that I would then access this external cloud glacier storage for those photos. And for me, the numbers didn't really work out because just to be able to access those photos, I could probably just buy another SSD card and put it somewhere else, and that will be worth it. But for people with large amount of photos, that can be a viable solution. That's just another option to consider as your last resort. And then something that a lot of people just end up doing is just having a lot of different hard drives. You can get hard drives which are pretty cheap, but the problem with those are that they might not be as robust. They might break down very quickly. If you have any experience with external disk drives, then you know that those break down very frequently and you have to replace them. And so I would recommend staying away from disk drive and moving on to SSDs. They are a little bit more expensive, but they are a lot more durable, so I think in the long run they end up being cheaper. But then you don't really need the cloud, and you can just have these drives located in your own home, in your parents' home, etc. And those can just be the backups that you would have to eventually resync up. The problem with that is that you would have to then sync it yourself as opposed to letting this online service like Backblaze do it for you. And if you are interested in maintaining a budget for your landscape photography, especially when you're buying gear, check out this video that I made before talking about how I stick within my budget for gear and I'm still able to produce photos that I really enjoy. Alright, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a thumbs up and comment down below what your current system is, because I think that is something that people don't do enough, which is share what system they're using. And I think people can just take different pieces of different systems and put them together. And I'd love to know if you have any thoughts on my system and how I can improve that as well. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.